Night Live sensibilities I had watching everybody set up a second ago. But I appreciate.
Talking about you, Ted.
Yeah, no, I know. Of all people, Ted. Shame on you, Ted. Of all people. Well, that's why we're going to put Ted on the spot first. And let me just first contextualize briefly. We have, as you all know, been moving in to the reopening of our economy in phases. And we've been very deliberative going back many, many weeks when we first started by focusing on the healthcare system, particularly our hospitals, many weeks ago, to begin to modify our stay-at-home order and to start allowing scheduled procedures. We methodically started to break down sector by sector of our economy guidelines to begin the process of a phased-in reopening. We also recognized in that process that we needed to focus not just sectorally, but regionally, recognizing that not every part of the state has been impacted by COVID-19 equally. And as a consequence, we have this variance process. And the reason I bring this up, it's very relevant to the conversation that we are about to have. And that's why I'm so grateful to all of you for joining this conversation. We're in real time drafting guidelines related to productions, TV, commercials, more broadly, the industries that unite us here together, because we anticipate rolling out on Monday, May 25th, some sectoral guidelines that would allow these counties that are in better conditions than some of the others to begin to move forward deeper and allow some modification, allow some work to be done, allow some movement in your industry. And so that's why this is timely. That's why we're grateful. And that's why I'm very honored that we have this opportunity to dialogue with particularly so many different perspectives that we're bringing to bear. I thought perhaps a member of our task force, Ted, would start with you, not just because I want to pick on you for your technical challenge there, but also because of your technical expertise. I mean, you in particular really have a sense of the globe, what you guys are doing in South Korea, what's happening in Japan, what you will start doing, I think, in Sweden and other parts of the country as well, not just around the rest of the globe. Maybe you can contextualize where you see things currently and where you're hoping we can go together here in the state of California.
Well, thank you, Governor. Once again, thanks for your leadership, and thank you for assembling such a great group to talk about this today. So one thing I would tell you is that, you know, our industry is quite important to the state and quite important to the world in terms of providing entertainment, providing escapism, but also providing employment and the keeping people sustained. This is a great time, I think, for us to figure out how we get back to work safely. Meaning the choices that we have to make today are not staying home or not. It really is just how do we get back to work safely? To your point, we are currently in production in places like South Korea, like Iceland, Sweden, and following and developing safety protocols there that are befitting the local environment. And the thing that we were finding out is there are no one-size-fits-all solution to production. Basically, there are different levels of density of population. Certainly of test more so in each of these places. So in places like Sweden, we're not doing testing, but they are doing voluntary quarantine in the weeks leading up to and throughout the production. In Korea, anyone with a symptom is immediately tested and production is shut down until you get the results. But certain protocols that we hadn't thought about before that you are employing in other places, like in Iceland, where they don't do ride sharing to set. So people are transported separately. But the one thing that is constant throughout the world is that production environments are very controlled environments. There are security budgets in place to make sure people don't come and go on the set who you don't know who they are and where they've been. So so in that way, it's a much more controlled environment. But the key to this, I think, is the getting to the place where we can have the safety of everyone on the casting crew ensured. And beyond that, they have to feel safe. to come and do the work of their lives. So to do that it's things like fast, dependable testing at scale. And I think being our ability to be able to lead that around the world is very, very important. To know when people come to work, that they come to work with confidence, that the sets are clean and sterilized, that the people they're working with are healthy, and that they are being looked after. So it's the actual logistics of health and safety, but also the emotions of that are very, very important.
I appreciate that, Ted. And I'll come back because I also want to get a sense what you're hearing in other states in a moment and where they're moving and at what pace, particularly states like Georgia and others that have been so aggressive on the production side. But first I want to ask Stacey, because Stacey, you're interesting on so many levels, and I'm so grateful you took the time to be on this.
Thank you.
This conference call, because you're also that intersection as a stylist and the work you're doing on hair, but in this industry. And we're also looking in parallel track to provide an opportunity to make the variants and make the adjustments in your industry broadly, even outside of production, TV and commercial industry, to allow hairstylists to operate again as early as next week in some of these counties. Tell us about, I know you've got kids and this has been devastating in the short run. Maybe just fill in the blanks, give us a sense of what you've gone through in the last few weeks and where you're hoping we can go together in the next few weeks.
Well, I mean, in the beginning of this, of course, it was sudden. Everyone was thrown into it. Industry-wise, you're working on a production. Everything is shut down almost immediately, having to pack down trailers that we usually take over a week to pack down, doing it in one day, not knowing what tomorrow looks like, things being extended. At home, I have kids. They were thrown into homeschooling. The teachers were thrown into homeschooling. I'm all of a sudden a full-time teacher, chef, psychiatrist, principal, the maid, the housekeeper, I'm everything, and so it's a little bit overwhelming, having to keep my own mental health together, to present a front for my children so that they have trust and faith that everything will be okay, balancing them mentally, and academically and all of those things. As far as financially, not knowing what's happening tomorrow, taking advantage of all the things that have been, afforded to us to take advantage of, all new, trying to navigate the systems that are overwhelmed and flooded. And, I'm grateful, completely grateful for those things being extended. But as we all know, it doesn't support your normal everyday life, so looking forward, we know this is not going to just disappear overnight. So we're going to have to navigate through this virus as safely and as sanely as we possibly can. On our task force, we're trying to put together those protocols. Like I think was stated before, there's a lot of different scenarios that take place with production, and just being educated, everyone on the same page, and not only protecting ourselves, but protecting each other. If I'm wearing a face mask, I'm protecting you. And if you're wearing a face mask, you're protecting me. So just trying to figure out and make sure we have all the personal protective equipment, and we all have guidelines and protocols that work for us to be able to work in a safe environment, following, CDC, OSHA, what have you, your guidelines. Just, it's important. And, public health guidance, like social distancing, has to be enforced, because people, as far as I think, inherently don't like being told what to do or feeling controlled.
Yeah.
Even if it's the right thing, we turn into adult children. So I think it's important for us to be on the same page, have some understanding, some education, and implement the proper protocols.
I appreciate that. Thank you. For John, you're on the producing side of things, the acting side of things. What are you hearing? What are your colleagues saying? You're commiserating back and forth, other folks in similar predicament as you. What are you hoping to hear? What are you currently hearing? Tell us a little bit about what you've experienced. take you off that mute, John. John can't. You can
I'm such an idiot. I'm so stupid.
good
Why am I even on this call?
Thank you, John.
Yeah, make Ted look better.
So first of all, being on a show that's, kind of currently in production, we have a couple more seasons left on This Is Us. And, we have to go back into production to finish our storytelling. And, we have a crew of 200 to 300 people that work in close proximity. We consider ourselves a family. So when we talk about the protocols and the guidelines that we may be following when we go back into production, it's really kind of daunting to all of us, the actors. We talk all the time. I was just on the phone with Dan Fogelman, and we were talking about we may not go into production until January, depending on whether or not there's a second wave. So as much as we'd like to get back online, we are very concerned about our crew as a family, and as and we the safety of our crew, the safety of the actors is paramount at the front of everyone's conversation. So I think all of us are just kind of sitting back and waiting to hear what comes out of conversations like the one we're having here today, because we're still, the guidelines right now the social distancing guidelines are definitely, keeping us nowhere near filming until at least September here in this state. And I think, paying attention to what's going on, like with Ted's productions in South Korea and Iceland, and seeing how they fare and what guidelines they're using is helping, because I think each production is probably gonna, take the overall guidelines and then come up with our own guidelines to make sure that we are protecting ourselves and staying safe. But otherwise, it's very, for us in this industry and in all of the entertainment industry, because we're in filmmaking, television, film, but we affect other industries, even live events and things like that. So I think really getting a handle on how we can protect each other moving forward is so important, because we don't want to, just destroy what we build, if you will. We build these guidelines and then we don't stick to them. We don't really trust each other to stick to them. Then we're going to destroy what we built. And I think that, it's really taking our time is important, and we're just kind of waiting to see what comes out of conversations like this.
John, are people being that patient under these sort of intensely difficult circumstances? Or are people saying, you know what, I'm done, this thing's behind us, it's sunnier weather, let's just go? Are you dealing with any of that friction and tension, or are people really being thoughtful and methodical about the next step?
Well, everybody has their own kind of, how they feel about COVID-19, how they feel about every state's approach, our own state's approach. And not everyone is going to feel like, this is a very personal thing. We have a lot of middle class and lower middle class actors that work in this industry, and every job counts. And a lot of our lower middle class to middle class actors have side hustles, that other job that they have. And a lot of them are in the restaurant industry. So they've lost, jobs on two fronts. So of course, people want to get back to work now, because we have to work in order to sustain ourselves. And at the same time, I think that most people are realists and understand that, the virus is still spreading. There's still new cases coming to us every day, and it affects everyone, not just the people of a certain age, and not just people with low immune systems and immunocompromised. There are people that are seemingly healthy getting the virus and not recovering from it. So I think the people that, that I've been dealing with and talking to we're more about being safe and figuring out how to survive, going back to our survival instincts and saying, hey, you know what, I don't need so much. I can live off little, and we have to do that in order to kind of survive. This is a thing, a once in a lifetime thing that most of us haven't dealt with. So it's really hard for me to even answer that question, because there's so many different right. opinions, and and with social media we hear and see all of them.
No doubt about it. Ava, I imagine you. Similarly, in terms of production that you had to stop on a dime, and everything else, I imagine you had planned and organized. How's that reset? How are you able to sort of keep things on ice, keep things on hold, keep things together, at the same time prepare so you can move quickly when things loosen up?
Yes, can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say, Governor, thank you for having me, and I'm so feel very grateful to be living in California. I have loved ones who are in states that are doing what I feel are questionable things, and so I just feel proud to be here and the way that you're doing things. So thank you. For us, for me, I'm just deeply affected by the challenges of my crew members. While I can kind of comfortably sustain myself through this time, I have so many crew members, including my own brother, who's a barber on one of our productions, who literally, just had to stop and nothing else came from there. So very eager to try to figure out and develop and design ways that we can get back safely when we do get the green light, and that also that this kind of tribalism, kind of biased thinking that we're seeing on a national political level doesn't find its way into that reopening. That's something that we're thinking about a lot at Array. How can we make sure that doors are remaining open for women and people of color, that we don't constrict in our fear. And I think that's going to take up protocols and processes and some real kind of structure to guide people. Of course, my alarm's going off. Hold on. To guide, because you're working at home. There, you're not on the set. There it is. It's turning off. Okay. To guide people to that end. I think one of the things that's been positive though about this has been the new ways that we've learned to work, that I never thought would work, right? And like virtual writers' rooms, right? Like remote working for staff and all of those new procedures and things that we're coming up with that we can take into this new era and kind of build from. And I think that's helpful in the way that we're designing things at Array on set. Yes, it's going to be hygiene and screening and masks and all of that, but we're really trying to look at, and I'm interested to hear from one of my grip brothers here, how we work on this set, right? Usually when you're on a film set, everyone's there at the same time. Even if you've already done your job, you've set up the lights and now you're just hanging there while the actors do their thing. What we're trying to think about is pods, moving people off. When you're done, you leave. You may be down for a couple hours at another location. You would come back. Just the actual movements and rhythms of a set being much different for the larger crew. Someone like, Stacey's crew, they'll come in, they'll do the hair and makeup, and usually they stand by for touch-up, in running in between every shot. We need to figure out new ways to, hey, maybe we're gonna have to figure out that shine in VFX, right? Whatever's on the face, right? New ways to keep people in smaller groups and to congregate a little less on the set. So those are some of the things we're thinking about because I can't help the timing that we get back, but we can make sure that once we're back, we're safe, we're solid, and we're doing everything within our power to keep people working happily.
So interesting. Ava, thank you for sort of prompting. Let's turn it over to Danny to help sort of answer some of those questions. Danny, that, creates a construct in terms of, how you're used to doing business. And, I imagine you guys, and you're working very actively within the union as well, probably sharing best practices and getting a sense of how we can operate radically differently as we move in this new phase until we get that vaccine or immunity. Tell us a little bit about what you guys are thinking in that respect. Maybe pick up on what Ava was saying.
Yeah, thank you, Governor. Thank you all for having me. To speak on what Ava was speaking of, as soon as this happened, 150,000 union members were launched into unemployment. And we are, as a whole, an industry of problem solvers by design. So the first thing that we did is like, okay, this is the problem. How are we going to solve it? What do we need to do? What changes do we need to make? I launched myself into asking all these questions and found myself here talking to a lot of the crew, having several Zoom meetings on, okay, what needs to happen? We think that we need to lessen the crew, the numbers of crew on set at certain times, like Ava was speaking of. I know that corporations that we do jobs with already instill the pod aspect of it. Wearing wristbands means certain access to sets and no access for others. It kind of keeps the numbers of people cross-contaminating down to a minimum. I think we have been practicing that, and especially on the commercial side, and it is doable. I think that, like Ted was speaking of, the productions around the world are showing us how this can be done. They're kind of setting the precedent of protocols that are working and that seem to be working, that we can kind of feed from. And we're kind of forming our own protocols, and we're going above and beyond because the last thing we want to do is have our industry shut down again. We're hiring epidemiologists to look over our protocols, to give us suggestions of like, this will work, this won't work. So I think that we're really doing our due diligence on our end to make sure that all of our workers are safe. The problem that I see and that we've discussed in several of these meetings are that someone needs to pay for all this. And so there's a very fine line in the middle of all this of having as safe protocols as possible to keep everybody as safe as possible, but also keep it within the constructs of financially feasible for production to afford this. And the last thing we want to do is price ourselves out of business. And I know that much like budgets already, productions go elsewhere to different states, to different countries where labor or union restrictions are a little softer and expenses are a little lighter. Might be more incentive tax-wise to go somewhere else. And we're trying to find that middle ground that's going to keep everybody safe, but yet make it affordable for everybody to still come to work. That's our main challenge. That's what we're working on, is to find that middle ground. And I think we can find that. And I know that the California has great film incentives now. There's going to be a competitive nature back with that again, I believe, to get the business. So that's something we're going to have to look at later as a state to maybe entice a little more tax incentive to keep production close. So those are the kind of the things that we're working out right now.
Really helpful, Danny. Thank you for that. And I certainly appreciate the need for this state to be more competitive in this space. And let me just stipulate to that, because that's obvious. The world is competing against the world we invented is now competing against us. So we cannot rest on our laurels. And frankly, for a few decades, I think there's ample evidence we did, and we paid a price for that. And so we have to be more competitive. Ted, Ted, you and I, we talked a couple of weeks ago, and I thought it was really an interesting conversation, and the extent you want to share components of it. You made some really interesting comments to me about distinguishing between the types of production. You could talk about reality TV being very, very different in terms of addressing some of the issues that Danny was bringing up versus, voiceover work for animation versus, a quick TV series versus full-on production. All of that, we have to sort of begin to break down within the sectors. You want to amplify that a little bit so we can sort of get our arms, start thinking about that more?
Yeah, so we were talking about the ways that you enter back into the work. First and foremost would be, do I recognize that each of these productions have very different dynamics? And what we had found, first of all, I would say that the resilience of this industry has been remarkable, in my opinion, which is within a few days of shutting down productions and post-production, post-production was already starting to ramp up remotely in all different capacities. Right. Our animation teams immediately within a few days, certainly within a few weeks, had their entire productions running remotely from people's homes. Post-production, we have right now about 220 productions that are in various states of post-production all over in people's living rooms and kitchens and bedrooms. And it's happening, and just people kind of self-organized and got it going. But when it comes to physical production, that can't be work from home. So when we try to look at those things, you start looking at something like a documentary where you might be just shooting with 2 or 3 crew, shooting one person in a confined space, or even better, outdoors. where you can easily practice social distancing and those kind of things. And then it starts working its way up in the level of complexity to panel discussion shows where you have to move chairs further apart. To Ava's point, all the folks that get everybody ready for the shot, then assembling somewhere away from the production so that they are accessible but not on top of one another. All those different things way up to probably be the most difficult thing to get back going, which would be a big crowd where you have to assemble 300 people for a shot. And so that requires a lot of testing and a lot of protocol and a lot of logistics that we're going to try to figure out as we go. But don't try to figure out a way to hold everything to the crowd shot risk standard when there's a lot of production that's much simpler and easier to control than that. And then we'll get that work done too. But we've got to work our way to that to where we get to our level of confidence is equal across all those levels of production. And I think that's something maybe we have a unique lens into because we are producing in just about every discipline of production for Netflix today in almost every country and every language. So we are trying to work through all those different complexities. But the way that Stacey described, the way that this shutdown happened, I mean, it happened like that. And everyone who thought knew what they were going to be doing for the next 6 months or next years in John's case, then all of a sudden didn't know what they were going to do next. So for our productions, we have been able to continue to pay the crews for all those shows that are shut down right now. So we've got $150 million plus going into that fund to pay those crews today. And that's, for me, it's like there's a level of commitment to people that you have got to make. And you've got to know that when you come out on the other side of it, that they're going to be there for you too. So it is a mutual investment in one another. And to know that this is temporary. This is temporary. And the long term, we're all going to be back to work and we're all going to be producing again. And we're all going to be doing it safely. And the key is, Danny's right. There is an expense associated with all of this. And when you and I talked a couple of weeks ago, Governor, we talked about the parallel between getting back to air travel after 9/11, which was their TSA protocols that if you would have told us before 9/11, if you told me you were going to have to take your shoes off to get on an airplane, you would have said that sounded pretty crazy. But not only do we do that, we figured out a way to do it pretty quickly. And then we'll figure out a way to do it and pay the TSA agents more and all those things. So it can definitely be figured out. We have, the smartest people in the world working on it. And we just have to have the level of cooperation with one another and with government to understand that, how do you work to enable a safe production, not make it impossible to move forward the safe production. And we have a unique challenge in California because we have, a city, a county, and a state that have got to get highly aligned on things. Like I have a production right now that has 3 days left, requires a heat permit, a city permit, and a state permit to get back in business. And today there are different definitions of almost everything with which so we've got to work on that for sure.
Great point. And by the way, that's a helpful point in terms of just the simple permitting process and ways perhaps we can substantially align and improve on that. Ava, I saw you. Oh, sorry, Ted, go on.
And guided by the particular profile of that production instead of what it's going to take it back in production generally. There's no answer to that. It's how to get this production going and this production going. And it's going to happen at different times. Yeah.
No, it's helpful. Ava, you made a point, and it's just interesting. I mean, you've been able to find new work styles, new arrangements with colleagues, et cetera. I mean, do you really feel optimistic that we're going to start to shift the way we now do business into the future? Or do you just think some of these adaptations are temporary, or do you really think there's opportunities here to bring in a new mindset as we go into the new normal and eventually get through this thing? Yeah, there you are, the mute button.
See?
I'm contagious.
Well done, John.
I hope that there'll be new energy that we take from this. we should take the things that really worked before and move on from the things that didn't. And that's across the board in our industry. We're seeing shakeups and challenges and rethinking of the old way, from exhibition to distribution to production. You know, in any kind of production, there are three phases, actually four. You've got prep, pre-production, principal photography, post, and the marketing. And then it goes into distribution, exhibition, all of that. The whole flow of it has been disrupted. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to say, okay, this sucks, but what can we take from it that is working and bring into the new era? What can we leave behind that was broken? Yeah. You know, with those old ways that didn't work. This is an opportunity for us to rethink that. And so I'm bolstered by that idea. And, you know, one thing I'll say about film sets, though, a good film set is a very safe place, you know, and the crew members that are here can attest to how closely crews work together to keep each other safe. And so to your question that you had asked John about appetite for people to get back, crew members are about safety. I mean, like great crew members are about safety above anything else. You have department heads here who are going to be curating who they're hiring on their crews and their departments. And that's all trickling down from the director, producer, to the department heads, to their crew. And I think that when I speak with people around the industry, it is a hypervigilance around this and a real desire to get it right so that we don't kind of take two steps back. Right. You know, I get it from my mama. I try to stay positive, you know, in an atmosphere that, you know, has a lot of loss. You know, I lost a family member close to me. I lost a crew member. And that can't be in vain. You know what I mean? That you can't slide back. You know, when you release the numbers and each day, and we hear how many in ICU, how many who have it. You know, you can't get to the other side of this and be in the same place. There are too many lives lost and too much we have to learn so that those deaths aren't in vain. So that's the way we approach it, and just trying to remain hopeful.
I love that. I appreciate that. Stacey, I mean, you know, all that extra burden, it's sort of in the spirit of what Ava said. I mean, this stress for you, I love what you said, you're a chef, not just, you know, a parent chef, you're dealing with mental health, your own challenges, struggles. Must be harder though. You can't virtually, you know, maybe you can in your industry, styling maybe, but I mean, some of the physical work you have to do, you're constrained by this reality. I mean, how do you see any sort of opportunities here to think anew, act anew as we move forward, or you know, how are you processing all that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Eva said, you learn there's new ways of doing things. I have actually coached a few people through some self haircuts virtually. I don't know how well that will work for TV. That's an issue with our hair and makeup departments. There is not any social distancing. Yeah. You can't social distance and do hair or do makeup. We have our actors to think about, and actresses as well. When they're wearing masks, they can't get makeup applied, you know, so I don't know how we would navigate that. To me, if we are returning work and there's a need for a hazmat suit, it's not time to go back to work, you know, so, you know, that's an important factor. You know, it's just dealing with stress and high energy and multitasking. Like everyone here, we all do it in our industry. So I'm navigating it pretty well. And we're just, you know, trying to figure out how we will get back to work when it is time to get back to work. Like everyone here has agreed, workspace, time, you know, being careful as cosmetologists, licensed cosmetologists, hairstylists. We are licensed and we did study and learn sanitation and disinfecting. And that's something that we do on a daily basis. And like Ava said, on set, we run safely, we work safely. Our unions make us take safety classes on a regular basis. Now they'll be different. There'll be new elements to that, you know, so I'm confident that we will be able to figure out a way to navigate this and work safely and get back to work. And it's just, taking our time and figuring it out and working with all the entities that we have available to us to figure that out. That's really the basis of the whole thing.
Yeah, appreciate it. John, have you been able to keep busy? I mean, you able to generate revenue, and or you doing some of the production work now, but not the acting work? Or, I mean, what's this? How you been able to navigate the last few weeks in that respect?
Well, I mean, as an actor, of course, I haven't been able to work because there's nothing filming. I'm based in LA, so nothing is filming here. Yeah, I have a company and we have projects in development and we're working on that. But they're, as far as revenue, no. And I think for me and my fellow actors, that's something that we have to look at when we're talking about getting back to work. Emotionally, of course, we all want to get back to work, because when you're not bringing in revenue, it's very scary. It's you have a family to take care of, you have bills. So wanting to get back to work is paramount, but also the actor is going to be the least protected person on set. And that's something that I think me and all my fellow actors are discussing. We can't film with PPE on. So how are we protected? How, from what Stacey was talking about with hair and makeup, yeah, we have to get our hair and makeup done, but how what kind of PPE is going to be involved? How are we going to, trust that the people that we're working with are being as safe as they can when they're not on set? Because here in LA, I think it's going to be, we can't quarantine when you're doing a television production. And when you're working at home, it's hard you can't just quarantine an entire crew and cast. Like, people are going to go home and they have their other family members that they work with and or live with, and so we have to think about how we're going to protect ourselves. I know that I've been talking to and dealing with SAG-AFTRA on how we're going to get back to work. I've been talking to them. They've been briefing me on everything they've been working towards, from the CARES Act to so many different things. And our union is staying on top of making sure that we are going to be protected with guidelines moving forward. But no revenue for I think most actors at this point, unless they have some kind of side hustle they can do, where they're bringing in revenue, which, again, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the revenue comes from jobs where you, again, have to interact with people. So actors have been hit from both sides.
Yeah, it's a great point. And Danny, just before I turn it over to Tom, I mean, you guys, and it sounded like, just from your first comments, Danny, you guys have really been putting together guidelines, best practices, and in the spirit of what John was just saying, in terms of, and when we go back, how we go back. How far along are you guys in sort of organizing all of that thinking, and what are the sort of remaining hurdles, areas where we can be supportive, things that we should just be aware of?
Yeah, we've been very thorough, talking to every union, every guild, having a lot of meetings and kind of gathering all the information of what needs to change, how is it going to change, and how it's going to keep everybody safe and still be feasible financially, as I spoke of before. A lot of things will change on an everyday basis on the film set. I think that we have technology of certain pieces of equipment that can change to keep less people away from the actors, remote heads on dollies, different pieces of equipment that can alleviate having as many people on a set at one time, and that'll help immensely. There are ways to do it. It's going to have to start from the top with the creatives and the writers and the directors, or we're all going to have to, as they say, be in this together to create content that is doable under the new protocols. And that's going to be the challenge, is to kind of put it into this bowl that we're going to be placed into. But I think with all the creative minds, I think that it is doable. And that's going to be the challenge, is to have the protocols placed in front of us, and to creatively have to figure out how to make it work safely under these new protocols.
I appreciate that. Tom, you've been listening in, and you've been part of many of these conversations and the larger conversations. Any thoughts, questions you have?
Well, I definitely appreciate everybody's input, and I'm definitely hearing a lot of concern with safety and support for the protocols and the phased, reopening of the California economy. The question that I have that springs to mind from listening to what everybody's been saying is this. We're hearing a lot about a need for safety. We're hearing a lot about how that may cost more. And that also that I think Ava's point that we can't miss this opportunity to make sure that we proceed with our deepest values moving forward. The question I have is, in some industries, the impact of this pandemic has accelerated changes within the industry. So that, for instance, just to choose one, in retail, people who are people who are doing basically online retailing have a huge advantage because of the pandemic that existed before. But the pandemic has accelerated their advantage over, in-store retailing. So as professionals who've worked in this industry for a long time, looking at what you guys have been talking about, the need for safety and the accompanying costs with Ava's point about also wanting to be our highest values, is there something within the industry that this pandemic is going to make change, not just in the next month or two, but over time? Is it going to make it move to different places? Is there going to be, Ted was talking about all the different kinds of productions. Are there certain kinds that are going to become more feasible, relatively less expensive, more likely to do more programming going forward? Are there changes that we should expect as a result of this pandemic when we think about the future? So when we think about California, we should expect them and try and make sure that Californian workers and businesses are part of that change and are protected through that change.
Any of you guys want to jump in on that?
I could say that the stuff that we're working on, we've joined with the local 798, which is most of the East Coast, and the 706 is the West Coast, and under the IATSE, so that we can try to have some solidarity as far as what we agree the protocol should be, so that across the states, the requirements for safety don't exceed expectations, as far as financially. So we've been working all together so that, like was stated before, production may not maybe say, let's go to New Orleans and shoot. We don't have to follow these protocols. It won't cost as much money, and so on and so forth. So we're working as a union together, East Coast, West Coast, to try to have solidarity as far as what these protocols might be.
I guess, so there's not a race to the bottom.
Right. Exactly.
I think we're talking a lot about safety protocols, which is, wildly important and, kind of all we can do in this moment when we can't shoot. But I think the question that I'm hearing from a lot of crew members and just all of us that work is, when are we going to be able to shoot? Right? When can we shoot? And what is that going to look like? And how is it going to work for crew members who are not protected by unions, independent productions, where that stuff will need to really be mandated by the state, because there is no union to kind of oversee exactly what's done. And, so many questions about, a lot of the talk that I find myself in is what we're going to do when we reopen, but I can never seem to get my arms around the question for crew members that call me, and who are online and social media talking about this every day, as to what the walk back home to the set is going to look like. Can you share, either of you, share any of the officials on the call, share a little bit about the forecast for folks who are watching, or, what it's feeling like to you? I know there won't be any absolute answers, but the spirit of the conversations that you're having?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, look, we're hoping to put out some guidelines next Monday that will allow regions, allow counties primarily, based upon prescriptive criteria, based upon their self-attestation that they can produce a minimum number of tests. They have the adequate capacity to address the possibility of a community spread and hospitalization capacity, et cetera. All these criteria that we set out within an industry, we will allow them the ability on a regional basis, a county basis, at least we estimate roughly 53 of our 58 counties will have the ability. Doesn't mean they'll meet the criteria or can attest to the criteria to have containment plans, protection plans. But if they do, they can begin moving and your industry can start reopening. The challenge is, and I recognize, and really I'm hearing it today, and it's very helpful, is this patchwork, especially for your industry, is even more challenging. But the good news is we are starting to see some light, and we are seeing data that allows us to make these decisions. But again, in that data is the reality that data can change based on behaviors changing. And people not, as you were saying a little bit ago, not self-enforcing or self-policing or being as responsible. And then all of a sudden, we're now going backwards, not marching forward together. But good news, I think, as early as next week.
So Monday, June 1st?
Monday, the May 25th. Yeah.
Oh, the 25th.
Yeah,
That Monday. Well,
so
fantastic.
we're working, and that doesn't mean everybody, the light goes on everywhere.
Yeah.
But it allows people, and so we're just trying to socialize this, get people to start really thinking and planning, and start to work in the spirit of collaboration. The challenge, and I'll be just candid, LA proper, the county, even today, the number of deaths that came in, disproportionate number came out of the county. They're seeing some good signs, which are very encouraging because of the outstanding work the county's done in the city in particular. And we're very proud of their work and working hand in glove with them. But it remains a challenging part of the state for us still. And so we are a little concerned they'll be a few weeks behind potentially everybody else.
I have a question.
I'd say that being a safe place to work is inextractable from being a great place to work. And that counts, for studios or states. So I do think that, keeping that balance in place is going to be one of those things that'll make the long-term difference. And I don't think anyone who's rushing, and if they're taking shortcuts on safety, I think it's going to have terrible long-term effects on them.
No, Ted, I appreciate that. By the way, just because I'd be remiss, are other states, are you much farther along in some other states, or, how's everybody else sort of faring in terms of marching in this direction?
I'd say not in practice. I think in meaning that there's nothing else happening any faster. There's a lot more talk about moving faster, maybe being a little more nimble in how to work with, like I said, the various needs of a specific production versus trying to come up with blanket regulation. So I do think there's some of that happening in other states that feels a couple of weeks different from us, but not dramatically.
Not dramatically. Stacey, you were going to say something? I'm sorry.
Sorry, Kat, I interrupted.
No, thank you, please.
Oh yeah, I just, one of the things that stays on my mind at all times is we can implement all these protocols and get all the education and classes, and we can be in solidarity and learn how to work safely. But there's other things that we don't have any control of, and it's the access to like proper personal protective equipment. Like if some of those things aren't available to us, like how do we navigate being safe when it's part of being safe?
Yep. And by the way, thank you for that question, because that's foundational. I talked about testing, hospitalization. We could talk about ICUs and work that we're doing on tracing, isolation, and quarantine. But fundamentally, just the simple capacity in your industry, particularly to have a mask that your customer can wear, and not just yourself and your colleagues. And the good news in that space is we have been procuring and distributing tens of millions of masks now. It's extraordinary what's happened in the last few weeks. We've been able to get these larger contracts. We have the list. I get an inventory every morning, over 70 million procedure masks, surgical masks now in an inventory coming in, millions a day, and we're trying to get millions of them out. And so we were all just last Friday to get 11 million masks out, childcare facilities, into the schools, which I know matters to you and many others watching, getting to senior centers, IHSS workers. We're starting farm workers, the foods supply chain to grocery stores. And we're going to be doing the same in your industry quite specifically in the coming days, weeks as well. So this is all concurrent and all part of the reopening process. That's why these masks are so much more than just providing for our frontline heroes, our nurses and doctors, but also for getting this economy moving again as well. Anne, do you want to close out, to sort of amplify anything that's on your mind as we move to get these guidelines in print and start to draft them?
Yeah, thank you, Governor. First of all, it's really powerful to hear all of you talk, and it's the creative industry always impresses me with how you approach problems, and so I just want to say thank you for the creativity that you're bringing to it. I think the governor just has an incredible urgency of now, and so I just want to let you know that he is really making sure that we are hearing you. Tom Steyer also has an urgency of now, and I am making sure that we're implementing as quickly as we possibly can to get these guidance out there. And Dr. Angel and Secretary Sue are working really closely to make sure that from a public health standpoint, from a labor standpoint, and then of course our business economic development team is working. So we are putting them together. We'd like to get them out by Monday. We will get them out by Monday. And then I think, the biggest hurdle that we have with regard to your industry right now is this regional problem with regard to Los Angeles. And so I don't want to sugarcoat that. And it is that we have increasing cases in the LA area. And so because of that, it is going to have some delays in the Los Angeles region. And I just want to be honest about that, because it's something that we are working really hard with LA County, with the public health officials there, with the elected officials in LA area. But I don't want to, say that it's going to be a switch on as quickly as it might be in other areas. So we'll work closely with you. We'll get this out on Monday. We'd love to follow up and make sure that we get, real feedback from you so we can do this the right way. Thank you.
Yeah. And I just in closing, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and just a deep gratitude that you all took the time to participate in this, and for all the incredible work that you guys have done in general terms, and in the work that you're helping advance for us in specific terms. It's meaningful. And I just want you to know I also just deep respect and empathy for everything you guys are going through personally, not just professionally, as we all navigate these very challenging times. So thank you for the spirit that brought you here and the incredible work that you've done that will be helpful and advancing our collective cause. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank
Governor.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Governor.
having us.
Thank you. See you.